Welcome back to another episode of the Blue Hand Outdoors podcast. I am pleased to have Mr. Matthew Newton this week from Final Destination Outfitters out in the great state of Kansas. How are you doing this evening, Matthew?
Pretty good, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well, doing well. Can't complain too much. Everything's going good. And also, happy Memorial Day weekend to you.
Happy Memorial Day to you as well.
So, where would you like to start at? Would you like to start with turkey season, deer season, how you guys started, where you want to kick us off at?
I mean, it's your show. Uh, I do like turkeys.
All right, well, let's start there. Let's talk turkey. How'd you guys do this turkey season out there in Kansas?
Man, I've been guiding turkeys in Kansas now for I think this is 8 or 9 years.
Oh wow.
I've owned my business. This is the fourth year for my business.
Mm-hmm.
But this was one of the best turkey seasons I've ever had. Which is always good. Don't get me wrong. So far in my business, we've only ever had one person that hunted, the 3 days and didn't at least pull the trigger.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that was just, some terrible weather and other things mixed in. But this year, man, we had 100% success and only one miss all season, which was awesome.
That is
Uh,
awesome. That's great numbers to have.
yep, yep. We ended up the season with 29 birds, and we got one more family friend that's coming out for a couple of days. So
Okay,
hopefully we can finish with 30.
there you go.
So
Yeah, our season out here, out east in Delaware and Maryland, ended last weekend and the weekend before that. So I'm kind of
yeah,
been done, but I don't really get to do much traveling this year either for turkey because me and my wife last week just had our first baby. But hopefully next year I can get back to traveling a little bit.
there you go. Yep.
Yeah.
Our season ends on the 31st of May. I usually don't like to guide past the 15th.
Mm-hmm.
But occasionally we have some people out here that, I'm so busy with clients earlier in the year, and if they've got a tag and they want to go, I'll try to take them late and see
Mm-hmm.
what happens. So
What kind of birds do you guys have out there? I know you have. I've seen on your page and your Final Destination page, you guys have a lot of Rios.
yeah,
Do you guys have just Rios, or is it like a mix? Because I know in Nebraska there's a little bit of a mix.
yeah. So on the eastern side of the state, we've got easterns for the first probably 8 or 10 counties, 8 or 10 counties. And then there's a area where there's hybrids between easterns and Rios. According to the NWTF and according to the state biologists, our county where we live in is the first county of 100% Rios, and it goes west towards Colorado, all
Okay.
Rios. Um, I'm not going to say that we don't every once in a while get a dark bird, but 95% of our birds are, what you imagine a Rio looking like.
Mm-hmm. There's no Merriams out in Kansas, or there's your
So
kind of like scattered towards out west.
Again, according to the NWTF and the state biologists, there's like two counties in the very southwest corner that are considered Rio Merriam hybrids. There's no
Oh,
true Merriams in Kansas.
okay.
Yep. So
Because I talked to, I don't know if you know Mr. Kyle from KT Customs in
yeah,
Nebraska.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, he was telling me that it's kind of like flip flopped for Nebraska. They're more Merriams and
Yeah,
Easterns, and you
yeah.
guys are more Rios. And yeah, that's pretty cool though, because it's like it's interesting to see like they're so close but yet so different. You know.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I mean, a lot of guys like to come to Kansas and Nebraska for their Rio and their Merriam, because they're two states that are pretty close together.
Hmm.
They can knock those two species out in one trip. Um, but yeah, it's pretty cool how that works.
Cool. So how did you first get started into guiding?
Oh shoot. When I was 18 years old, um, I'd always wanted to be a hunting guide as long as I could remember. They got baby pictures of me in camo and shooting stuffed animals with Indian bows and arrows, But as you get older, as most people do, you kind of think you're just going to end up in a regular 9 to 5 job and stuff like that. I was working for my dad as a pool cleaner and stuff like that, and basically, a girl broke my heart, dating a girl, and I said, "Screw it, you know what? I'm gonna go for it." And I ended up putting in a lot of job applications from pretty much Alaska to Maine to Florida in Texas and everywhere in between. You know, if somebody had an outfitter, I was trying to send them a resume. And obviously I missed a bunch of people, but I was just trying to get my foot in the door.
Hmm.
And the first guiding job I got was in Colorado for horseback elk hunts.
Oh wow.
Yep, man, we were completely off the grid from July, I think the 30th or so of July until November. I was living in a wall tent, army wall tent in the White River National Forest. And, let me tell you, going that long without a real bath or a real shower, him elk ain't the only things that smell you, let me tell you. But, it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed being out there and doing that type of stuff, but I realized that I like to be a little bit closer to civilization. And I ended up, getting a job after that. Um, I wasn't supposed to be a hunting guide. I was supposed to be a cameraman at an outfit here in Kansas the next season because I hadn't had a lot of experience guiding turkey hunts.
Mhm.
And anyway, about 1 week into the season, one of the guides had made a lot of the clients mad and um, ended up getting fired. And so the boss, the owner of the place, he told me that either I could fill his spot or I could pack up and head back home because he couldn't afford to pay a cameraman with being short a guide. So
Right.
I ended up taking his place and ended up guiding 25 birds, that year for him. And let me tell you, it was rough. There was a lot of clients that came in that weren't necessarily happy about being put with me because I was not an experienced turkey hunter, but
Mhm.
I was very good at scouting, and I was really good at figuring out where the birds like to hang out, where they like to be, what direction they wanted to go, and all of that. So we'd get in front of them a lot, and the clients would end up calling them in. And I learned, you go every day for 50 days straight, 50, 60 days straight, you're going to learn a
Mhm.
lot,
Oh yeah.
if you're willing to. And so I ended up learning a lot that year. And the owner of the place, he invited me to come back. And the next year, so I did, learned even more the next year, got even better. And I quickly realized that turkey hunting was becoming my favorite thing. I grew up deer hunting, and we didn't do much turkey hunting, but that was very quickly becoming my favorite. So from there, I ended up guiding in Ohio for deer for a little bit. Then went back to North Carolina and guided deer, turkeys, waterfowl, and bears there. And long story short, I had met a girl while I was in Kansas, and we were long distance for a little while, and it got to the point where I knew I needed to go back and either break up with her or marry her. And I got a wedding ring on now, so I guess that answers that. But
Yep.
I came back to Kansas and guided at that place for a while. And then we got married, and shortly thereafter, I decided that it was just it was too long of a commute. We lived about an hour from that outfit, and
Hmm.
I was just spending way too much time there and not at home with my wife. So there wasn't currently an outfitter in our town, so I started my own business, and we've been in business for 4 years now.
That's great. I love to hear it.
Yes, sir.
So, how do you guys just guide deer and turkey for Final Destination, or do you guys do a little bit of everything since you've kind of hit a little bit of everything?
So we do a little bit of everything except for upland game. We don't do pheasants or quail.
Okay.
If somebody wants to come and basically just pay a trespass fee, we do have that option. I try to, I don't advertise that because I personally am not very good at it,
Uh huh.
but I do know where some birds are. But we focus on whitetail deer, Rio Grande turkeys, ducks and geese, and then we do thermal night hunts for coyotes as well.
Okay. How how have you guys done with the coyotes? Because I haven't really talked to anybody that does any thermal coyote hunting. I assume it's for depredation around for turkeys and fawns and all that good stuff.
Yeah, for the most part, it also has a lot to do with the cattle industry out here as well.
Hmm.
They are pretty hard on the deer and the turkeys and stuff like that, but they're also bad on the calves. So We do that. There's a season in Kansas. We can only do it January, February, and March.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, yeah. And they get a lot of pressure out here during those 3 months. I mean, people absolutely wear them out. So we try to keep pressure low on our farms. We try to only take 3 or 4 trips a year, and
Mm-hmm.
usually guys come out for about 3 or 4 days, and we'll vary anywhere from killing a dozen to one year we killed 33 in 3 nights. So it depends on the weather, it depends on the time of year, and stuff like that. But we usually do pretty good.
Switching gears a little bit, you said you guided in Ohio for deer, and you now guide in Kansas for deer.
Yeah.
Do you see any difference? Because I've also deer hunted in different areas as well, and I've just kind of wondered, deer are like the same, like they're pretty much the same animal. Like they do their own thing for the most part, what they do. But I was just wondering if you've seen any differences from those two places because they're kind of similar layouts of the land.
Well, it's actually quite a bit different from where I guided. So I guided for Southern Ohio Outfitters, Dave
Okay.
Lusk. You might have heard of them. They got a pretty good following on Facebook. And it's in Southern Ohio, so it's right there, not too far from Virginia, West Virginia, and Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very hilly, borderline mountains right there. And so we hunt these deer in Kansas a lot differently because we are on the edge of what's called the Flint Hills here in Kansas. But the hills here are like maybe 100 foot, whereas those those hills are a couple 100 feet.
Mm-hmm.
And the amount of woods is insane. There we were guiding on maybe 500-600 acres, and only 100 acres would be a field. Four to 500 acres of it would be woods, and you'd hunt the ridges and the fingers and saddles and stuff like that. You were
Mm-hmm.
trying to catch where the deer were crossing over the mountains or whatever like that. Whereas out here, you might have 150 to 200 acres of property that you're leasing and paying for, but there's only about 20 acres that actually have trees on it.
Mm-hmm.
So um, the main difference is not necessarily that the deer are different, because deer are deer within an extent. It's how you hunt them and the terrain they're in.
Right.
So here, in the mountains, don't get me wrong, we did use the hunt the wind and stuff like that. We paid attention to it, but also it would swirl in those bowls a lot, and
Mm-hmm.
it was very hard to say, all right, we're only hunting this spot on a north wind or whatever, because you'd send a guy in and it was blowing out of the north at the truck, but by the time he got up on the stand, it was blowing out of the southwest,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever, just because of the way the terrain is out here. It's not necessarily as flat as a lot of people think, but the wind is pretty consistent. As long as you can get over a 10-mile-an-hour wind, it's going to be very consistent. And Kansas is known for having good wind. So we're very, very particular on what winds we hunt, certain stands, and our access is very big key too. Uh, you know, some guys kind of scratch their heads when I tell them, "Hey, we're going to walk across the middle of this field to get to this stand or whatever." It's about where the deer bed and what they can see from that bed.
Mm-hmm.
And so, our access is key because we want to slip in and slip out without those deer seeing us or getting bumped. A lot of our timber, like I said, we're hunting 10 to 20 acres of timber. Heck, I've got some places where we killed one of our biggest bucks. Matter of fact, our biggest buck, there was less than an acre of trees on that farm. So and he was bedded in there.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to find a way to slip in there and hunt him without him knowing we were there. It had to have the perfect wind, had to have the perfect access. And if you've got those two things, a lot of times you're going to kill one.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. So if everything lines up right, it's always going to be a good day in the deer woods.
Yes, sir.
From I'm just gonna try to get this question out of the way because this I feel like this is a good question.
Yeah.
From my own research and just probably people being in the industry and knowing Kansas and Ohio are known for big deer.
Yeah.
Which of those two from guiding do you think has the biggest deer, or have you seen bigger deer?
Personally, laying eyes on them and guiding, I've seen bigger deer in Kansas, but I will say they kill some absolute monsters in Ohio.
Really?
I'm not trying to take anything away from Ohio. I think one of the major differences is just simply, I mean, so Kansas has a draw for deer
Mm-hmm.
and, for non-residents. We limit how many people we let into the state. And, as an outfitter, it sometimes sucks. I had 6 guys this year that didn't get a tag, which is a pretty low number compared to a lot of other outfitters. I know guys that had 20 guys that didn't get tags.
Mm-hmm.
But we're pushing really hard for guys to get preference points first, so that helps. But anyway, but I mean, so that helps us to get those deer to maturity. Also, our rifle season's only 12 days in Kansas. And in Ohio they have a bit longer rifle season or gun season. They don't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily have a neck down rifle cartridge season up there, but the plus to Ohio is they have a lot more timber in most areas.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot more areas that people can't necessarily see or go to. So I mean, if I had to pick one, I'm gonna be biased and say Kansas. But I'm not trying to take anything away from Ohio. They got some really big deer up there.
Mm-hmm. Because I've heard a couple of guys or seen videos. It's like, oh, Ohio, you'll see freaking 200 inches walking around like it's nothing. And I'm like, well, not
Yeah,
just Ohio. There's probably other states like Kansas and Nebraska
well,
and Iowa and other places like that. It's like that too. But
the one thing I'll tell people is that in Ohio or someplace like that, you're looking for a lot of acreage of untouched habitat, right? To
mm-hmm.
try to hold a big deer or whatever. If you've got more than a dozen trees in Kansas, I can almost guarantee you that 150 plus inch deer is going to walk through it every year. I mean, so with my outfitter, with my business, there's no secret about Kansas. Everybody knows that there's big deer in Kansas, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of land is leased up out here, and a lot of whether or heck just locals hunting, and stuff like that. So when I started my business, um, I specialize in hunting the places that nobody else wants to hunt.
Okay.
So like that property I was telling you about has less than an acre of trees.
Mm-hmm.
Some of our farms only have a tree row on it. I mean, you can see through the trees, and it's just a tree row for a quarter mile, half mile, whatever. Um, and some of my farms, I have several farms that don't have a single tree on them. But either the neighbors have got trees, or it's a travel route, or there's the, one reason or another. I know that deer are using that area,
Mm-hmm.
but to most people that are driving by, and I've had landowners where I knock on their door and ask them, "Hey, can I lease this place?" And they're like, "Are you sure? I ain't never seen a deer out there." And just stuff like that that we end up leasing, and a lot of times that's where we kill our biggest bucks. Because out here, the big mature bucks, they don't like being around a bunch of deer.
Mm-hmm.
They like to be kind of isolated, and if they've got a couple of does during the rut, then that's great. If not, they'll travel and find the does during the rut. But as far as the early season in September and December, the truly old mature bucks do not like to be around a bunch of deer. If you've
Mm-hmm.
got a place that's got 40 acres of 40 acres of trees on it, I'm not going to say you're not going to have a big buck there, but more often than not, you're going to have a lot of 130s, 140s, and 150s there, which I love all of those. I'll shoot them in a minute, but a lot of times your truly big deer, 160, 170, 180, 200, are going to be in isolated pockets of timber that most people just drive by and don't pay attention to.
Mm-hmm. What do you look for when scouting and trying to go lease properties? Like what specific terrain features? I mean, aside from like a little bit of what you just mentioned, like you try to see any water nearby, any specific kind of like fields that they're aggregating or planting.
So, when I'm looking for a place, number one is trees, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily the trees that are on the place, but the trees are within a half a mile of it. You know, if there's a big block of trees within a half mile of a property, there's probably going to be deer that travel through it, right? They might live in that group of trees a half mile away, but they're going to make it out there in the daylight. You just got to be there when they do. As far as water goes, water helps. A lot of times out here, everybody likes to be on a creek bottom, and
Mm-hmm.
creek bottoms are great. I love creek bottoms. A lot of our farms have creeks going through them, but a lot of times those deer like to travel a lot more than a piece of property that'll have timber on it that doesn't have a creek on it. The
Mm-hmm.
deer like to get on that edge and they like to walk. So
Mm-hmm.
if you've got timber that doesn't have an escape route on it, they're more likely to hunker down and stay in that timber. So and water, like I said, water is great with the creeks, but I'm starting to get into putting out water tanks and stuff a lot, trying to provide water for animals that they didn't already have it before, and it has is working very well for us out here. I dare say that it's as good as pouring corn on the ground. We can do that here in Kansas. We are a baked state, and so we do that quite a bit. There are some of our stands that we don't, hunt over bait, but it's just how it lays out, how it works. Sometimes we've got a bait between two different stands, and sometimes you can shoot them from both stands, sometimes you can't. But it's my job to provide an opportunity, so I'm going to use every legal method that I can, and we use minerals, we use water tanks, and we use corn to do that.
Do you guys use cameras much to see like patterns, or do you guys not really? Are you guys not
Yeah.
big camera people?
So I use cell cameras. I've
Mm-hmm.
got I think last time I counted, I've got 55 Tacticam reveals, um, which it hurts my pocketbook quite a bit, but thank God they give me a little bit of a discount, after you get like 20 cameras, I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
So I might be getting a few more. I had a couple that got flooded out this year. We had some
Oof.
uh, pretty bad rains and stuff, and they were at the bottom of a hill, and that water tends to go downhill, so they got flooded out. But
Mm-hmm.
I'll be replacing those. I'll probably have 55 to 60 again this fall. So
Nice.
yeah.
On the back end, what do you look for scouting turkeys?
Oh, that water and cottonwoods. Uh,
Cottonwoods. Wow, that's the first I've heard that.
yeah, yeah. Out here, if you find cottonwoods along a creek, more than likely you're going to have turkeys. Not always, but more often than not. A lot of times, if you get on a creek that's got or a creek or a river that's got turkeys, you're going to find a flock of birds every mile to mile and a half. So, what I do is generally I've got certain areas that we go to, and we may have 10 or 15 farms within a 5 to 10 mile, distance. And something too is I don't always get the properties where the birds are roosted. Sometimes I get across the road or a half mile from there. The biggest thing is scouting for those, laying eyes on the bird and or laying ears on them. Sometimes I've got some farms where you cannot see them unless you're in there hunting them. They don't come out near the road or whatever, but I know they're in there because I listen to them. So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of drive time for turkeys. I don't glass and scout near as much for deer. I generally let my cameras do the work for me there, because out here, like I said, there's a little bit of hills and roll to the ground out here, and deer are a lot more bashful than turkeys are. They like to stay out of sight for the most part. So I let my cameras do the work for that, but turkeys, we do a lot of driving, a lot of glass, and scouting for those.
Nice. Shift gears. What? So you guys guide waterfowl out there, correct as well?
Yes, sir.
What's your guys' flyway? The Central or the Mississippi? I forget.
So I believe we would be considered Central Flyway.
Okay.
A lot of the birds from Arkansas and Missouri and stuff, they're starting to bump over more into our area and Flyway.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's because of pressure or agriculture change or whatever, but we're definitely seeing a bit of increase on that end. As they're starting to see some decrease, we're starting to see some increase. For our waterfowl hunts, we offer a 3 day, meals and lodging included waterfowl hunt. And we try to focus on ducks one day, geese one day, and one day of whatever the most we can find. Um, and it almost never fails. We always shoot a couple of geese on the duck hunts and a couple of ducks on the geese hunts.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we generally will hunt ponds for the ducks or rivers or creeks, whatever. Um, and then generally the goose hunts are in a dry field, with full bodies and stuff like that, socks and silhouettes, and then like I said, we find one day of whatever we can find the most of.
Mm-hmm. You guys don't flood no cornfields out or anything like that?
I think that there's a handful of people that do, but unfortunately, we don't have that. We do a lot of day leasing.
Okay.
Um, I've got a lot of relationships with a lot of the farmers near us, and some of the stuff is on stuff we lease for deer, and some of it's on stuff that we lease for turkeys. But a lot of it is just hey, they're in Mr. John's field. We're going to go knock on his door and make sure he's still cool with it, and pay him a day lease on it. So
Mhm.
most of the time, for ducks, we're shooting mostly puddle ducks. We do occasionally get some divers and stuff like that.
Oh, really?
Um, yeah, occasionally we've killed some pretty odd stuff every once in a while. You just shows up. We killed a golden eye in a pond not much bigger than my living room.
Wow.
Um, yeah, yeah. And golden eyes are pretty common out here on the lakes and the rivers and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. But to kill one in a farm pond's pretty rare. I do know a guy right up the road that they killed one while they were snow goose hunting. It was legal. It was during duck season, but they
Mm-hmm.
were sitting in a snow goose spread and a golden eye flew over and they shot it. So, yeah, we get into mostly, I'd say 80% of our ducks are mallards. We get into the teal a little bit, green wings mostly, and um, we get, widgeon. A lot of times in the fields, we'll get into pintails. This year
Mm-hmm.
we killed a lot of ringnecks. Killed a couple of wood ducks. Trying to think if there was any other oddballs. We killed a couple of scaup. Um, that was pretty, you know, unusual for us.
Scott?
Yeah, a scaup.
Oh,
Um,
Scott. Yeah,
yeah,
bluebills.
yeah, bluebills. Yep, yeah. We killed a couple of those on a small pond as well this year. So, and then geese, sorry, we get lessers, cacklers, graders, for the Canadas, and then we get speckle bellies. Then we get Rossies, regular snows, graders and lessers, and blues. So, I mean, as far as geese go, we have just about every goose you can want to kill.
Mm-hmm. That's cool.
Yeah.
Do you have a preference whether would you like to kill versus ducks and geese, or any specific kind you like better?
I just like pulling the trigger. So for I go back and forth. Ducks, I don't have to throw out as many decoys usually,
Mm-hmm.
but I got to get wet. And geese, I can stay dry, but I got to throw out a whole lot more decoys. So it just depends on the day and if I got to break ice. If I got to break ice, I'd rather be goose hunting.
Mm-hmm. So you've mentioned before you've been to Ohio, you've been to North Carolina, you've been elk hunting in Colorado. Where out of all the places you've been would you say is your favorite that you've hunted, and what species would be the favorite that you've hunted in that place?
Mm. Um, so my two favorites, and something I didn't mention, I guess, because I don't own the business for it, but every year I try to go back to North Carolina and guide for tundra swans
Okay.
there. So it would be a tie between Kansas turkeys and North Carolina tundra swans. Those two are my absolute favorites, and it's really hard for me to distinguish between the two.
Hmm.
Um, I'm kind of like one of those that I enjoy whatever I'm doing at the moment. So like I do love guiding for deer. I'd say guiding for deer is probably my least favorite of all of them. I do enjoy it and I love it, but it is a lot of preparation and hard work for me to not get to see it go down. Right.
Right.
So I'm out there trimming, shooting lanes, baiting, running cameras, making mock scrapes, doing all the work, and then I stick somebody else in the stand and they get to watch the deer die. I don't get to see that.
Right.
So that's why it would probably be my least favorite. But waterfowl, I get to sit there and I suck at calling, so I can't really call the waterfowl that much. I have to pay somebody else to do that. But I can set the decoys and, I get to watch the hunt go down, yell kill them and stuff like that, go pick up the cripples and or the dead ones. And, I get to participate in the hunt a lot more. And then turkeys is the same thing. I get to yelp at them, and I get to participate in the hunt a lot more. So, but tundra swans, if you've never done that, you need to do that. That is one of my favorites.
Well, it's funny you say that because where I'm from, Delaware, is a tundra swan state.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna apply this year for a tag. But when I was hunting this past year down here, by chance I killed a mute swan. A mutes are invasive here.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, and I sent him to the taxidermist, and he's gonna be coming back here shortly. But ever since I got him, I've been kind of had that swan bug. Like
Yeah,
I had that. I'm like, okay, these are big birds. They're
yeah,
cool. They're really pretty to look at with all the nice white feathers that they got and everything.
yeah.
So
It,
I'm
it's
go ahead.
it's one of those hunts. At least for the tundra swans, you get one tag, per person for the whole season.
Hmm.
So you're only allowed to, if you're good, you only have to pull the trigger once,
Yeah.
right? Um, but as a guide, I get to go every day for, anywhere from 2 weeks to 30 days. And man, it is so fun. I don't like calling them dumb, just because I love them so much, but they're very gullible bird.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're a very gullible bird. If you got enough white out there and you can halfway holler at them, because down there in North Carolina, we take a lot of pride in voice calling them.
Hmm.
We don't use a tube or anything like that. So you're literally hollering at them and just trying to sound as much like a swan as you can. And they come in there cupped up, and you shoot
Oh
them at
yeah.
10 to 15 yards. They make a big old thump when they hit the ground. It's a lot of fun.
I can imagine. I
Yeah.
I shot mine when he was swimming by because mutes are
Yeah.
more water based than tundras are.
Yeah.
But it was still I was like whoa when I
Yeah.
saw how big he was.
Yeah.
But I
Mutes are a little bigger than tundras, but
mhm.
they're still big. They're still big bird.
Oh yeah, but I definitely want to. I'm gonna apply for Delaware and North Carolina and try to get on a tundra. That's
If
the
you
new goal.
if you get a North Carolina tag, be sure to hook me up. I'll get you set up for it.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'll definitely hit you up.
Yeah.
What? Okay, so if you had to choose, would you rather hunt a 200-inch whitetail, a super turkey, or go for a limit of birds?
It's always that's a hard one to answer. If I knew I was going to kill that 200-inch deer, like if it was a guaranteed deal, I think I'd pick the deer just because I've killed a lot of turkeys and I've killed a lot of birds. So there was a situation that came up that was very similar to this. I had never killed an elk, and 3 years ago, I was set to go to New Mexico for an elk hunt, and I had a deer on camera that was going to bust 200 inches, which I didn't know that at the time. I thought he was like 180, 190.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he was on camera. And I actually had sheds from this deer. That's how I got permission on this place. I had went and knocked on the guy's door to turkey hunt. There was some turkeys out there, and there was a giant shed laying on his front porch. And I said, "Well, sir, I see you deer hunt, but maybe you don't turkey hunt. You mind if I do some turkey hunting down there?" He goes, "What makes you think that I deer hunt?" I said, "Well, you got that giant antler laying right there by your door." And he goes, "Well, my dog drags them up out of the backyard all the time." He goes, "And I just throw them away." He goes, "I ain't throwed that one away yet." I said, "Please do not throw that thing away. Let me have that." I said, "And if there's any way possible, let me deer hunt." And he goes, "Yeah, you can hunt, no problem." And so I went in there, specifically trying to target this deer because he had kickers everywhere and all kinds of trash. And um, sure enough, about 2 days before I was supposed to leave for New Mexico, this deer shows up. And I had had cameras out there since August, and this was like the 4th or 5th of October. And he just showed up. And so season's in, and I looked at my wife and I said, 2 days after I get into New Mexico, it's supposed to drop 50 degrees here. It was like in the 80s and 90s every day that time of October, and it was supposed to get down in the 40s and 50s. It was supposed to drop big
Mhm.
time. And I said, that deer's going to daylight while I'm out in New Mexico. And I was this close. I was this close to calling my buddies, my dad, and saying, "Hey, I'm not coming to New Mexico. I'm going to stay here and kill this deer." And I went to New Mexico, and I ended up killing a nice bull. I killed a 6x6 bull, so
Nice.
I'm pretty tickled about that. But sure enough, that deer daylighted on the day that I told my wife he would, and so I got back, and man, I hunted that deer. I hunted him, into November. So like the whole month of October and the first week or so of November, that's the only thing I had on my mind. But before I got back, he stopped showing up on camera, and I
Mm.
had no pictures of the deer. And I'm like, well, maybe he'll come back through chasing the hot doe. Maybe, just maybe he'll show back up. And come to find out, before I had made it back to Kansas, the neighbors killed that deer, and he scored 201 inches. And
Damn.
yeah, so I'm scheduled to go back to New Mexico this year, and I've done told my wife, my dad, and all my buddies, if I got a 200-inch deer on camera, I'm staying. But we'll see. I mean, a 200-inch deer is very hard to kill.
Oh
They
yeah.
they don't, even out here. I get pictures of one almost every year. Last year was the first year that I didn't get pictures of one that I knew was over 200 inches. Um, but they still, they're hard to come by. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
I've got 35 farms spread across 3 different counties, about 4,000 acres. And like I said, you get lucky to get pictures of one a year.
Mhm.
It is possible, but and likely if you're running that much that you'll find one. But man, they're hard to kill.
Oh yeah. Me and my buddy, I was chasing one that was almost 200 this past season.
Yeah,
There was a own debacle with that. I didn't get him, but
yeah.
I know the feeling. It's like he. Mm,
Yeah. The sad part was seeing the picture of him daylight with my tree stand in the background because the way that camera's set up, there you see the bait pile, the food plot area, and then my stand in the back. So it's cool when you actually do kill a deer, you're hunting, you get those pictures with you in the stand.
mhm,
My wife killed a really nice buck out there, not last year, but the year before. And you got, pictures of the deer standing there and us in the background. But yeah, I was looking at that picture with that 200-inch deer there in the daylight and my stand being empty behind him with a perfect wind and everything. Like if I'd have been there, I don't know that I'd have pulled it off, but I'd have gave her heck for trying.
mhm.
So.
Damn. So you mentioned you've guided for elk and you've done a couple of elk hunts. What's that like? I mean, you're the first guy I've kind of talked to since doing this about elk. I'm kind of just interested.
Oh yeah, they're like about a 800-pound turkey. It's a lot of calling, a lot of
Hmm.
scouting involved. Just getting where they want to be before they get there. That's the hardest part is getting ahead of them. They're not. the hardest thing in the world to hunt. In my opinion, it's about like a turkey. They're a very vocal animal. Um, but in those mountains and places that they live, man, they can cover ground so quickly.
Oh yeah.
And if they decide that they are not coming in your direction, there's not much you can do about it. Um, the thing is getting ahead of them, or getting them to come to you, one of the two. And most of my experience with elk have been during the gun season, so it's kind of post rut.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of bugle from time to time, but it's not like in the rut where, they're screaming coming at you while you're calling. More often than not, you're, like I said, trying to get to a spot and waiting for them to walk out in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
And, the bull that I killed, I should have killed on the first day of our hunt down there in New Mexico. Um, but I had told my dad that I would be at a certain spot, and I'm a grown adult and stuff, but out there's no cell phone service, and we didn't have radios or anything, and so I had told him I was going to be sitting by this one spot where there was a water hole there, and heard of elk about 500 yards from me going through the timber. You could hear cows mewing and bulls raking on trees and stuff like that. And I was hoping they were going to come down to that water hole, and they just never did. And I had plenty of time to get in front of them. Like I said, I should have killed them. But then the second day, I didn't that day. The second day, I got a little closer. I got within about 200 yards of them, and I was making moves that time, but um, it just didn't happen. And then the third day, I finally got exactly where they were crossing at. And I was so in New Mexico, you can shoot the tag that we get, it's a landowner tag. You
Mm-hmm.
can shoot anything except for a spike bull. You can shoot a cow or any branch antlered bull. And so I had told my dad, I'm a meat hunter, as far as for elk goes. I'm gonna shoot the very first elk I see that's legal. And I had heard some cows mewing coming up the mountain to me. And the first elk I see, all I can see is the top of its back and its rear end. And so I slip up a little bit closer. And about the time I pick my rifle up to get on it, I mean, it's only about 75 yards away. It picked its head up and it had a big old nice rack on its head, 6 by 6. So, of course, I shot it and it ran about 30 yards and fell over dead. But it just as far as elk goes, they're a lot of fun. Like I said, if you can hunt turkeys, you can hunt elk. It's just learning to call and learning to get where they want to be. That's
Mm-hmm.
that's the hardest parts.
You've guided in Colorado. What's your? I've heard a couple, read and heard some things about guys talking for elk and the wolves thing up there. What's your opinion on that? Now we're on the
It,
elk topic.
It's hard for me to say. I haven't been out there in nearly 10 years.
Okay.
So I'm a little bit distanced from that. But I mean, I'm very good friends with some outfitters out there, and they're pretty nervous about it. I mean, because they're not allowed to do anything about the wolves.
Mm-hmm.
So I. I mean, the wolves eat elk a lot. That's their main diet, and I don't think it's a good thing. That's for dang sure.
Yeah.
Um, I do believe that wolves should exist. I don't think they should be exterminated. But I do believe they should be managed and controlled.
Mm-hmm.
And two, a lot of the wolves that they're bringing into that area are not even the species that were originally
There.
there.
Right.
So, um, I don't like man playing God.
Yeah.
I'm very much against that sort of thing. We're put here to manage. That's what God wanted us to do. But um, I think bringing different species to an area is not a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, look at the invasives in like Florida and stuff like that. Like
Yeah,
they have one invasive, they bring another one in to try to manage it, and then it just
exactly.
you're in a whole big different pickle.
Exactly. Heck, that's even like that dire wolf situation. I mean, it
Yeah.
just quit playing with what has already been like. Heck, I wish there was bison everywhere. I wish
Yeah.
we could have a part in that, but Now it's not feasible for that to be, there's too many barbed wire fences and too many cornfields and stuff like that. Like,
For them to be roaming around again. Yep.
exactly. There's no way for that to be feasible.
And it's
Now
sad because
there's,
it's like an icon, like the buffalo or bison for some people. That is the what you think of North America or like the United States when they first people came here.
yeah.
The populations of them are like or farmed pretty much,
Yeah.
or farm
I
bison.
mean, there's some areas like I think in Utah, North Dakota, there are wild bison that
Hmm.
you can hunt, like on preserves or national forest grounds, stuff like that. I think the Ute Mountains is one. But anyway, I mean, there are areas, but as far as like in Kansas and Nebraska and areas where they used to roam by the millions, you just can't have
Yeah,
that nowadays.
yeah. It's
So there's no need in us trying to worry about it.
right. I mean, we've made it this far with everything we've got now. Just might as well just leave it how it is.
Yep, yep. Let's just improve what we got.
Hmm.
So,
As we get ready to wrap up here, what would be your favorite thing about hunting and being a guide?
what I do for a living, the reason why I like being a guide is because I get to do what I love literally every day that I can.
Mhm.
Some guys, my dad was a weekend warrior growing up. We only got to hunt on Saturdays, and that was it because my dad was a pastor, so we couldn't hunt on Sundays or stuff like that. So, we just had one day a week to do what we wanted to do, basically.
Mhm.
And being a guide, I get to go pretty much 6 days a week. It is legal to hunt on Sundays, but I'm a Sunday school teacher at our church and stuff like that. So we don't do any hunting on Sundays. But Monday through Saturday, man, I'm probably in the woods somewhere from August until pretty much May, because even in the months that I'm not guiding something like in February and March, I'm running trap lines and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So, um, just getting to spend time doing what I love, and also too something about being a guide is um, getting to watch young people kill their first animal. That's always something real special. And getting to take older people on hunts that they can't basically handle themselves. They can't go out and put a ladder stand up or
Mhm.
can't go out and roost turkeys or whatever. Uh, I've gotten I've gotten a couple of older gentlemen their last deer or last turkeys, and those always make me tear up more so than getting a kid their first bird, or
Mhm.
first deer. Um, I had a gentleman this year came from New Jersey, and I guided him in North Carolina for a bear, and then he wanted to come out to Kansas and kill a big whitetail. And this guy is 82 years old, and he's wanting to come back. I don't know if he will get to or not, but he's determined he's going to come back in 2 years. But at 82 years old, he made a 250-yard shot. I was trying to drive him in to his blind because he can't walk very far at all. About 100 yards is the farthest he could walk, and this blind was about 800 yards from the road. So I had permission from the farmer to drive him in. And as we were pulling into the farm, there was a 14-point buck, scored about 157 as he was. He had broken off two of his tines, um, but about a 14-point buck. And he was standing in the corn pile as we topped the hill. And so I immediately threw the truck in reverse and we backed back down. And I said, we got to crawl up over this hill and see how close we can get to this deer before he takes off. And so we crawled maybe 60 yards, got to where the deer was, and I got the tripod set up, got the gun on the tripod. And about that time, the deer picked his head up. He had no idea we were in the world. Just God put that deer for that man.
Mhm.
Um, the deer picked his head up and started to walk off, and I'm literally screaming to the top of my lungs because the wind was blowing and everything, and got the deer to stop. The deer stopped perfectly broadside, turned and looked straight at us, And at 250 yards, an 82-year-old man squeezed off a shot and smoked him. I mean, just torched him. And the deer ran about 100 yards and fell over. But just stories like that. I've had very similar for turkeys. Had an older gentleman that had trouble with breathing and coughing situations and just couldn't sit still or be quiet because of his hip hurting and stuff like that. And um, you know, we had a spot where some birds were coming through in the afternoons, and I'm like, if we could just sit in a blind, maybe one will be dumb enough to come by. And as I pulled up to the food plot, put the truck in park, I looked over to my left and I see a turkey laying in the grass. And I'm like, don't know what's up with that. Like I can tell it's a male bird because it's got black feathers. Because out here, and in most of the United States, your male birds have black feathers and your hens are gray, slightly brown.
Hmm.
So I was like, I could tell that's a male bird, but I don't know if it's alive or if it's dead or what. And so I got the guy out of the truck and we loaded his shotgun and walked around the front of the truck and basically just started walking straight at this bird and got to about 15 yards and I see the red head start coming up through the grass. And I'm like, well, he's alive. So hey, why don't you shoot that tuft of grass right there? And so he shot into the grass, hit the bird. The bird starts flopping around like crazy. And come to find out, it had like a 9-inch beard, an inch and quarter spurs, and just big old Tom.
Just hanging
And
out.
just laying there in the grass. And we'll come to find out, the bird had been when we skinned it out. The guy was using TSS, and the chest of that bird was full of copper plated sixes.
Ah,
So one of the neighbors, I'm guessing, had shot this bird in the chest, and he had ran on our farm and was just dying over there. But this guy, is in his 70s and he can't hardly breathe. He's coughing, and so again, just God placed that bird there for that man.
right.
Just stuff like that. That's why I do what I do is to get people an opportunity at something that they don't normally get to do. A guy from Delaware or New Jersey or Alabama or Florida or something, the chance at a whitetail deer that they've never seen before or a Rio Grande turkey or ducks or geese, whatever, just getting people to experience something that they've never seen. You get to see their eyes so big and that's what it's about.
Hmm. What would you say would be the coolest opportunity or coolest experience you've had from being able to guide, or like that guiding has brought you?
Just as far as like clients go, or
Whatever, like experience, clients, like what's the coolest
I
or
mean,
most interesting?
gotten to meet some really cool people, and not necessarily famous. I mean, some of them are, some of them aren't. I've been able to take Fred Eichler uh, turkey hunting.
Oh wow.
He actually came out coyote hunting as well. It didn't. It was very tough, but the turkey hunt went well. He's supposed to come back next year for turkeys. And then Trent Ellis on TikTok,
Oh,
Facebook, Instagram.
you've had him
Yep.
come out? That's cool.
Yep, he's turkey hunted with us. He was supposed to come deer hunt this year, but he didn't draw a tag, so he'll be coming next year. Shane Prophet, he's an up and coming country music singer.
Hmm.
He's come out and turkey hunted with us. But I mean, it's not necessarily the big names too. Sometimes it's just people that, heck, one time I took an old man swan hunting that was it was his job. He worked for the Smithsonian and it was
Wow.
his job to collect species for mounts for the Smithsonian.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and he had been retired for several years and was making his own collection for New York. And he wanted to kill every bird that ever flew through or stopped in New York. And so tundra swans migrate down through New York, and some
Yep.
of them stay there. Well, it's not legal to hunt them in New York, so he came to North Carolina to get us tundra swan. And this guy, it's kind of similar to the other guys. He's, up there in his 70s and 80s, and can barely pick up the shotgun. It took a couple of birds before he got one, but just sitting there listening to that man talk for hours on end. Nobody knew his name, but he had a job that everybody in the blind wanted.
Right.
Everybody wants to get paid to go shoot stuff.
Right, that's cool.
So, just stuff like that. I mean, I've taken people that worked at NASA. Heck, and sometimes you meet somebody and you ask them what they do for a living, and like I didn't even know that was a job. Like I met a guy
Right.
that makes the bottle caps for Coca-Cola. Just stuff like that. Just
Ah,
off
cool.
the wall stuff. You never know who you're going to meet. So
Hmm.
that's what I enjoy about the job is I like dealing with people. You know, my dad and my grandfather were both Baptist preachers. So and I'm not one. I'm a Sunday school teacher, but I'll sit there and talk the mules off ears off a mule.
Hmm.
I like meeting people and talking. So
That's awesome. Well, as we get finished up here, is there any shameless plug you'd like to throw out to the people?
yeah, I mean, basically, if you're looking for a big whitetail or a Rio Grande turkey or any sort of waterfowl, tundra swans or ducks and geese, make sure to hit me up. Instagram is MD Newton 96. Facebook Matthew Newton, and then my business is Final Destination Outfitters. For tundra swans, I guide for fourth generation outfitters out of Idlet, North Carolina, right there near the Outer Banks.
Hmm.
And they do a fine job on deer, turkeys, and waterfowl, bears as well. They do bears. But yeah, just be sure to check us out. We generally do pretty good at whatever we're hunting. So
Sounds good. I'll have all your socials and everything tagged in descriptions when I have everything posted as well, so they can get to you that way.
yep, I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on tonight, Mr. Matthew. I appreciate you, and I hope everything goes well for these upcoming seasons. And hopefully, maybe I can get out there to Kansas, or we can get on a swan down in North Carolina.
Sounds good, Hunter. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you.